Ladies and gentlemen, we've heard a lot over the last couple of days about the migration of people from cities to the country, particularly during the pandemic, but also the lack of infrastructure to support that migration, the lack of skilled workers, and particularly the shortage of farm labour. Our next panel brings together government and industry specialists to address some of these issues, to thrash out what changes are needed to create some really long-term solutions, all the while taking into consideration the wellbeing and mental health of our regional and rural communities. Couldn't think of anyone better to be moderating this panel than founding and managing director of Seftons Communications, Robbie Sefton. Seftons is a national communications company. Robbie's team provides strategies for corporate and government clients who need to reach rural, regional and remote Australia. She also runs a grazing and cropping farm with her husband near Tamworth in New South Wales. Come up to the stage, guys, and grab a seat. On the panel with Robbie today, we have Tyson Cattle, who is the Executive Officer for the NFF's Horticulture Council, and he's also the Public Affairs Manager for AusVeg. Julie Francis is the chair of the board of the Brigidine Asylum Seeker Project, which is a small not-for-profit organisation in Melbourne that's provided support for people seeking asylum for over 20 years. Natalie Sommerville lives near Spalding in South Australia's mid-north. She's a farmer, a grazier, business owner and manager, a mother and a proud Torres Strait Islander. Nat manages their farming business, and together with her husband and 2 children, she's been farming for 15 years, including managing 3,000 head of sheep. And finally, Shanna Whan is CEO of Sober in the Country and recently was announced Local Hero for 2022 at the Australian of the Year Awards. In 2019, Shanna founded Sober in the Country with a mission to help her bush peers understand that the simple, inclusive, life-saving message that it should always be okay to say no to a beer, and that can help to save lives. Ladies and gentlemen, put your hands together for Robbie and her panellists.
Thank you so much, Lucy, and it's just delightful to be here. And what a great conference it's been. I'm quite sure you all agree with me. It's fantastic that we're all back together, and also to have such diversity in the room. So thank you, Lucy, for hosting and chairing the session so well. And I'd like to acknowledge Fiona Simpson and Tony Marr for their great leadership, and of course the NFF team. They've just been remarkable, and I'm so proud of being a farmer and proud to be part of rural, regional and remote Australia, and all of the supply chain that makes it so rich and vibrant, and of course commercially and socially astute. And so what really makes the bush tick really well is making sure that we've got really good jobs, and also that we are able to be healthy in what we do. So that all leads to good social, economic, environmental and cultural wellbeing for all of us in rural and regional Australia. So having such a fantastic panel is just terrific. So again, I'd like to acknowledge our panel for being here, and I'd also like to acknowledge our traditional custodians of the land and the land that we're on today. So thank you for everyone for being here. So we're specifically here to have a yarn about jobs and also health. And like all of us, being a farmer myself, we find it really challenging to often have the right people on the farm when we need them. And so I have a sheep and cropping farm with my husband up near Tamworth. And prior to that, we were farming in Western Australia and also in Coonabarabran. And I grew up in Deniliquin in the southern Riverina. So I have a bit of an understanding of what it's like to be a farmer as well as operating in the system. So getting good people to work with us is really important, having the right skills. So Tyson, with your background in horticulture and also with AusVeg, I'm interested to hear about what do you think we need and where are we at? Now this panel's going to say it as it is, so go hard, Tyson.
Thanks, Robbie. Look, I think, as we probably heard over the last couple of days, I think what we need is absolutely an agricultural visa. I think that's a bit of a no-brainer. From the horticulture perspective, I guess the reason horticulture's been pushing for it for so hard, I guess, and for so long now is we have built a really heavy reliance on a working holiday maker visa and, particularly during COVID, on a Pacific Islander program, which really, working holiday maker visas designed for a tourist and cultural experience as opposed to an economic driver for a business. And I think with the Pacific Islander scheme, it's been really a driver around a foreign aid program. So we've never really had a proper economic visa that's really driven by business and driven by an industry that can really, bring in an efficiency gain into our business. So specifically for horticulture, when we talk about our $100 billion goal by 2030, we see real significant growth opportunities, I suppose, in horticulture through workforce. The average horticulture business 40% of their total cost of production comes into labour. That is significant in anyone's business, whether you're small, medium or large. Getting an efficiency capacity out of that is really, really important. And, having that reliance for so long on a backpacker visa that's probably here to have a good time and enjoy a night out and those sort of things has probably not done ourselves as an industry a justice in terms of the efficiency gains that we want to see as an industry.
I think the visa process would be just take so much of the anxiety out of it and also give consistency and clarity in what we need. So I might come to you now, Shanna Whan, who is Local Hero Australian of the Year. So I just really want to acknowledge you for that. That's fantastic. One of the joys in my life is that I've been the Deputy Chair of the Australia Day Council, and I've had the privilege of choosing the Australian of the Year for the last 10 years. And we've had a 30% increase of those from rural and regional Australia that have been represented. So I'd like to acknowledge you. And also Grace Tame was in my jurisdiction, so you're just going to be as hot as Grace. So that's fantastic. But I think what you stand for, Shanna, is, Sober in the Country, which is your fantastic initiative, and that's come out of your world, your life experience. But and so we're going to hear a bit about that from you, but also in that conversation that you're going to share with us, tell us a bit about the impact that you think that overindulging on the grog can have on jobs, as in what it's like, whether that's in your hometown of Narrabri or in the community that you have been talking to and working with.
Thank you, Rob, and thank you for your kind words. It's such a privilege to be here, and hi to all the delegates. And I'm a Maules Creek girl these days. It's hilarious, I've shifted south. But yeah, my Sober in the Country, the charity that I founded in 2019, was born of my own lived experience, which is, as I say, and I don't mean to sound flippant, but I was dying of alcoholism in plain sight of my own community. And I thought, well, something needs to change. So I decided to cheekily go ahead and be that change. And where we are today it's pretty extraordinary. We're reaching up to 200,000 people through our social media channels alone, and we're helping hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of rural and remote men and women choose a life with less beers or no beers. And we're doing that not through a prohibitionist approach, and we're not doing it through telling people what to do or what not to do. And we're doing it through our OK to Say No campaign. We just want everyone in the bush to know it's okay to say no. It's inclusive, it's user-friendly, and it's awesome. Just going to throw that in there. But to answer your question, yes, from boardrooms to rec rooms, from stations to corporate buildings, alcohol is a significant part of the rural culture. We can't even deny that. And while we're not prohibitionist in our approach, the fact is we lose 6,000 lives every year to alcohol. And we basically end up with about 160,000 of us in hospital every single year. And rural people are 150% more likely to get into strife, and only 15% of us are going to get help, which is pretty horrendous. Of the 700 people we have surveyed in our peer group, which is called the Bush Tribe, we've asked every single one of those guys, did you try and get some help to cut back or cut out alcohol? And did you have any luck? And the answer is yes and no. No one can get the support they want when they need it. So alcohol is really prevalent and it has a big impact in our workforce, but we're making change. And the thing that I want to share with you guys today is that people are actually now really embracing it and actively getting on board with it. And I actually think they've always been looking for an excuse. And our message and our purpose has kind of given them the language and a reason to shift gears and get with the program when it comes to 2022 and a safer workforce. So it's wonderful.
Fantastic, Shanna. It's just such a great initiative, and so much so that Shanna's has a really powerful vehicle called Australian Story, who are with us today, and you may see the camera here today, and like to acknowledge the crew for their contribution today. So smile, you're on camera. So thanks to the Australian Story crew. And I think that's what it demonstrates how important this message is, so thanks, Shanna. And Julie Francis, you're a farmer and you're the chair of the Brigidine Asylum Seekers Project, and what an amazing initiative. I'm sorry I didn't know about your initiative before we heard about you through this conference, but let's hear from you and about your workforce and what it's doing, and what do you think that we could do in Australia to actually make a difference for our refugees, etc.
Thanks, Robbie. Yeah, the Brigidine Asylum Seeker Project is Melbourne-based, and it's very tiny, so no worries that you haven't heard about us. We did a project last year with the help of a volunteer, getting a number of asylum seekers out into fruit-picking jobs in rural Victoria, which I think is why NFF invited me along. But I'll start by saying there's a considerable number of refugees and asylum seekers in Australia living here who want work, who are not working, who are unable to get work. And it's a big disadvantage to our whole country, because these are people that are saying, we want to pay tax, we want to contribute to this society, and we're not enabling that to happen. We've got, and not only is it bad for the whole country that we're not using these resources and getting the benefits from people, but so many people are dependent on charity to survive, and that is making people's mental health spiral downhill rapidly. So it's such a loss, and there's so many more opportunities. So there's about 30,000 people living in Australia who have tried to seek asylum and have not been successful, so they have no visa status at all. There's another 60,000 who are in the process of seeking asylum at different stages. About half to two-thirds of those have work rights. The others are not allowed to work. So again, this dependency on charities like the Brigidine Asylum Seeker Project. So we set up a small project to get some people out and working in the country, and that was really successful, but a lot of hard work. People don't have savings, they don't have networks, they don't have cars. So between the Brigidine Asylum Seeker Project and the Rural Australian for Refugee networks that are out in the country, we worked out which farms needed workers, where we might find accommodation that was suitable, transport. We needed to pay for people to get work boots and to put down that initial money for a deposit on their rental, because, again, without savings, this is not an easy thing to pop people from the cities out into the country. But it did work, and we really think, though, the big opportunity going forward is with proper incentives to get people moving out to rural and regional Australia, because it is difficult for people who don't have much of a network, even in the city, to take the leap to move to the country. But I think there are so many carrots that we can provide, because unfortunately so many people have so little. So if we tied at the incentive of having the right to work, you'd find a lot of people who don't have the right to work would be very keen to move to rural and regional areas to be able to work. Or for others who don't have that certainty of being able to stay in the country, there's a lot of temporary visas that are given out. Or the Ukrainian and Afghanis that we are letting in, they're only on 3-year visas. It's always temporary. If you could give people that incentive of, if you move to a rural or regional Australia, that there's a pathway to permanent residence. If you stay in an area for a certain number of years, or work in a certain industry for a certain number of years, that there might be permanent residency, that there might be the chance to bring your family over on family reunion visas. So I think there's a real opportunity for win-win here, where we can get people out to help ease some of the labour shortages, dwindling populations, but also not just helping our regional areas, but helping these individuals who are having these periods of prolonged uncertainty, prolonged lack of work, which is leading to these family breakdowns, depression. I just think if we can work on the employment issue, we can see a lot of positives.
Thanks, Julie. And as a farmer, I could think of nothing better than to have a Ukrainian family come and live on our farm to actually take some pressure off them and certainly to contribute to our community and our farm as well. So I just don't quite understand why it's so complex and hard for government to make those decisions, but I'm quite sure many of us feel the same way. So thank you for the great work you do. Now, Nat, in your world, and you're in South Australia, and you actually have a really interesting background, as in you're a farmer as well, and you're involved in the grains industry and in land care, and also as women in agriculture. So you span industry, community, as well as diversity, and congratulations on being a graduate of the Diversity in Agricultural Leadership program from National Farmers Federation. So what's your experience of jobs, and what are the complexities and the opportunities that you experience in your daily life, whether it's on the farm or whether it's in the industry groups or community?
Thanks, Robbie. So my experience starting out in the agricultural sector was almost, I've been working in the agricultural all my life, but corporate-wise it was, 20 odd years ago. So back then there was hardly any women agronomists, and there was a lot of a little bit of bias happening, and the rest of it. Now, I am Torres Strait Islander, so I see things with a cultural lens over a lot of these issues that we've been talking about today. And so when we talk about workforce issues and employment, this is forefront for me in my mind. It's fantastic that we've got the ag visas to get the job done. I think we haven't quite got the ag visa yet, have we? We found out yesterday. But anyway, hopefully, it's almost there. But a strategy to get, the work done in this country right now, long term, that needs to change. We need to be able to enable and encourage our current unemployed people to work in agriculture. We have to try harder. And I know there's been some awesome programs, initiatives, and lots of hard work and dedication in this area already, but we have to persist. On our property, we have been employing all kinds of people from all over the world, and including our First Nations from the country in which we farm. And they keep saying to me, Nat, can I please work for you? Can I please work for you? And why is that? Because it's a safe space to work. And I think when we talk about changing things up, and especially workforce and encouraging people to come in from a foreign country and work here in Australia, we have to ensure that the strategies are in place to make sure that they are looked after and that the cultural safety is there for them, let alone the ethical stuff as well, making sure that their fair pay is there and work standards is, above board.
Actually, you've just answered a really important question that's just come in from Nicole, and she's asking about what's happening so overseas workers feel confident that they can expect to be safe and fairly paid. So I think that there's certainly steps in place and through processes. And do you want to have a quick chat about that, Tyson, from what's going on with NFF and the Hort Council and
Yeah,
Ausveg?
love to. Look, I think Fair Farms section is in the room here today. I think it's been floating around for the last couple of days, but Fair Farms is essentially exactly that. It's a certification around, helping employers understand their employer obligations, right? Making sure that, we've actually got a standard or a set of principles, which really, I understand most people would say, well, that's just the law, right? We should be actually just obeying the law. But, we've gone another step in terms of making sure that we have the assurances that this farm is doing the right thing and is standing up above the crowd. So, Fair Farms has just got some more government funding to help us roll that out, and we're certainly ramping that up, and I think the intention is to make that across all of agriculture, which will be a great move. But I think we're starting to see Fair Farms start to come in, ethical supply chain sourcing from some of the major supermarkets and those sort of things to make sure we are getting on top of any exploitation that's out there. And I think Fiona's been really strong in saying that one case of exploitation is one too many, and I think we're working towards stamping it all out.
Yep. Cleaning up our act, we need to do that, absolutely. just as important as animal welfare, all of those important aspects of how we do business in our agricultural sector. Feel free to text in your questions, and we're keen to hear them. And I've actually got a really excellent comment here from one of our audience. It says, can Jason Strong from MLA hire Tyson Cattle with a name like he needs to be working in beef, not horticulture? So Tyson, we're going to make you the pin-up guy of beef and hort, okay? So there's nothing like having a very powerful personal brand opportunity here. So coming from the marketing space, we can create that for you. So going hand in glove with having really good jobs, which brings prosperity into our rural and regional communities, as well as good social licence, as well as cultural and environmental balance. Let's start to have a yarn about health. Now, we just heard from Professor Ruth Stewart, and she had some very important messages for us, and what a remarkable person she is. What a pity she's not with us today. But she talked about geographic narcissism. What a cool terminology that is. And I know for myself, my company's just been doing some work in regional development in southern New South Wales and Deniliquin, in fact, where I grew up as a kid. Now, that community's got 8,000 people in that town, and it's in a disgraceful situation as far as its health situation. A town of Finley, which is 30 k's away, has just been given $45 million for a hospital when it's got half the population of Denny, and Denny hasn't got a hospital that works, doesn't even have an emergency system that works well, and it's got really big issues with doctors, having doctors and dentists and allied health. So it then comes back to advocacy, which I know NFF is very involved in at the moment, with Australian Farm Institute looking at a paper on that. But as rural and regional communities, I think it's one of our biggest issues is health, and certainly education. But health, we can't attract good people to the bush unless we've got good infrastructure such as health. So what are the challenges that we all experience in our communities here in the panel? What is it that you'd like to see happen from a health perspective? And so Tyson, from Hort's aspect, what are you thinking there about jobs and health, but particularly with a focus on health?
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I'll leave the other panel members to talk about their regional communities, because I live in Melbourne, and it's we don't necessarily, as far as I know, have issues finding GPs. But I think from an industry perspective for vegetables, putting the AusVeg hat on, we're currently, one of our election priorities is pushing for increased domestic consumption of fresh vegetables. So, everyone thinks about the 2 fruit and 5 veg. The average Australian consumer is only consuming 2.4 serves of vegetables. If we increase that by 1 serve, that'll generate just over $1 billion back into our sector. So that's, we're a $5 billion industry. If we can grow that by 20%, that's pretty significant. So there's a huge opportunity there. I think as we're just, as AusVeg, just sort of moving into this health space now to try and understand it a little bit better. But I think what we're finding out is it seems to be, yes, we've got our health issues, but there's agricultural opportunities with us being able to meet those demands. So healthy diets, healthy eatings, and all those sort of things is really, really important. But it's kind of trying to get government to understand that there is an economic connection between agriculture and health. So if we're going to meet the health requirements that we all want to do across, healthy lifestyles and healthy eating particularly, then agriculture can play an important role in delivering that. So I think it seems to be a real gap that keeps coming up in the short time we've been entering that space.
Yeah. Very good point. Shanna, what do you think? Health, and I guess your message would be around mental health, I'm thinking.
My brain is just trying to think, how can I summarise a decade into a few minutes? So passionate about this topic, and anyone who knows me knows that very well. We're woefully under-resourced and under-equipped in the bush. That is just not even a question. And that's not to say there isn't a huge amount of passionate, dedicated people. We need support. For instance, me, myself and I, and my charity with 2.5 staff are probably doing the work of 22 people and impacting a couple of 100,000, I'd guess, at the very least. So change is actually really possible. but we need support. And what is very frustrating to me, and I'll bring this back to my own cause because that's why I'm here, you know, I've noticed over the last 8 years talking to people all around the bush when it comes to health and alcohol and mental health and wellbeing, we have so many organisations that work across, say, suicide prevention or mental health and all of these sorts of areas, which are incredibly important. But have you ever stopped and thought about the fact that underneath all of these charitable organisations or government organisations, the root cause of so much of what's going on with health in our communities is always coming back to alcohol? It is always coming back to alcohol. It breaks my heart because no one other than Sober in the Country is tackling that truth front on. And I don't understand that. It's a hard topic for sure. And so I think what we're still missing is funded lived experience experts, which is apparently what I am. I was an expert at alcoholism. And you know the reason our charity, despite all odds and despite every roadblock thrown at us, is forging ahead is because I am speaking on behalf of a plethora of rural and remote people struggling to drink less or to drink not at all. And yet when these guys go and ask for help, and believe me, they're asking, there's not enough available. So in addition to GPs who are trained, and in addition to, you know, getting more and more people out in the bush, we need lived experience experts. We need to gather more Shannas. And we're doing that through Sober in the Country, but we're doing it, oh man, with not near enough resources, which is why we're working constantly on that. And I think everything all of us that are here at this conference are working towards is sustainable ag, yeah? Regenerative ag. My question is, what on earth is the point of sustainable ag or regen ag if our people are not sustained? And then, thank you. Thanks. You know, and we're not being sustained. We're screaming for help, we're asking for help. My heart breaks 20 times a day when I hear stories from some of the most... Everyone in this audience, by the way, you are the people we exist for. We're here for people like you because no one looks at us. And that was my story too. And so, yeah, look, lived experience in the bush. I mean, I could go on, but I think I've covered it.
Thanks, Shanna. And I think last week you were at the Northern Territory Cattlemen's Association conference and you were speaking there and touched many people's hearts and souls. And I'm on the board of Headspace, and actually another board member was there, and our focus is on kids that are, you know, from 12 to 25, young adults to 25. And so we'll be talking to you soon from that point of view too about young people. But it's just so important. And so I just want to say that you have touched many people's hearts, but also the messages is really important. So thank you.
Thanks,
That's great.
Thank you.
Julie, what do you think from a health point of view for the work that you do with your refugees and things? What are they experiencing and what can we do better?
It's a big question. I don't know if I'm qualified to answer. The mental health issues, but you know, we also know it. I mean, we're based in the city, and there are more people that can help there, but people don't necessarily want to go and see a counsellor or a psychologist, psychiatrist. So it's quite tricky. And I guess the one thing that I see that the Brigidine project does well is it gets to know people. It's all about welcoming people. It's where the benefit of being a small organisation is we get to know all the people we work with and they feel part of a community. And I almost feel like what Shanna's doing too is, and we talked before about safe spaces, how do we make people feel welcome? What can we do as individuals to encourage people? Because you can have all the government policy in the world, and we need a lot more better government policy around refugees and asylum seekers. But even if you've got it, you can't just send people out to a town and expect them to fit in and make friends. And so I think it is up to us as individuals. And I take heart from groups like the Brigidine Asylum Seeker Project, from groups like hardly a group, almost individuals like Shanna are doing to help make places feel welcoming. And I think if we can create those safe spaces for people, maybe we help with the mental health. But yeah, definitely the professional services are needed as well.
Thank you, Julie. Nat, what are your thoughts on this? It's such a really big topic, isn't it?
It is absolutely, and I suppose there's another element, and I think Shannon touched on it. It's bringing the environment part of the equation. So when we talk about food, good food, and the economics, we also need good mental health and the environment. It's holistic. Everything needs to work all as one. Without one, there's tension points. And so what we find is, bringing it back to my farm, for example, when we do have a drought, right, obviously there is tension points, and that's when you're going to see more mental health issues around. And if we don't have the psychologists there to provide that support, that's when you get your alcoholism. And it's, something that's really easily fixed just by providing an extra support service. It seems almost, I'm based in the mid-north of South Australia, and it seems really easy to access these services, but to wait 6 months to talk to a psychologist is too long. 2 weeks is too long, 2 days is too long. So how do we bring this back so that when people are in a situation when they need to access mental health services, they can access it immediately, and not over the phone, not, face-to-face, as you all know here today, is the best thing to connect with for all of us. I'm saying not, this is generally, some people like to do it over the phone, but to actually engage with someone face-to-face, sometimes this is the first time people have talked to someone in a very long time face-to-face. And I cannot emphasise how important it is. We talk about, the family farm situation in Australia. We've got 85,000 businesses in Australia nationally, and about 95% of those are family farming businesses. These are NFF facts, by the way. I just Googled it before. So that tells you we have a lot of family farming businesses, which means, and it's the elephant in the room, it's like succession planning is one of the key stresses from my experience working with farming businesses over the last 20 years, and you just do not hear it unless it's at tension point.
Yeah.
And it is absolutely critical that we provide more services in this area, otherwise we will see more immediate and severe mental health issues. The land prices, increase in land prices, the testing of trust structures now, we haven't seen this before, but it's a thing now in the last 5 years. These are all adding to our succession issues for family farming businesses. And I'm seeing a lot of women, because it is normally the women that are talking to me in trusting conversations, that are coming to me and saying, this is, really dire. And it's just that elephant in the room.
Thanks, Nat. Succession is a really challenging topic. And yeah. So I'm now going to ask our panel we've got less than 4 minutes. So that's less than a minute each. So pretend that we're in the country hour ABC and we're running it up to the clock at the top of the hour. Tyson, what is the message you'd like to leave us today with in under a minute? Thank you.
Yeah, okay. Look, I think it's a really interesting discussion. I think, we are probably on the front line in terms of horticulture in seeing some of these challenges on the ground, given that the size of the workforce that we rely on. Particularly, we've got 18,000 Pacific Island workers in the country now, more than we've ever had before. We've got more approved employers accessing the program than we've ever had before. Some of the challenges that you guys raise is spot on, and we're kind of doing some work with DFAT at the moment to help our approved employers understand sort of the cultural understanding and support their workers, because I think sometimes if there are challenges on the ground that the worker is feeling, whether it's Tongan worker, a Fijian worker, a PNG worker, or whoever it is, our growers don't necessarily know how to deal with that. So we're trying to do some work with DFAT in terms of better helping them equip the approved employers to know how to handle those situations, because as we know, a happy worker is a productive worker, and that's what we're all aiming to achieve. So I think it's a really interesting discussion, and it's going to evolve over time, particularly as more growers are going to access the ag visa, touch wood, and there's going to be some cultural challenges that we're going to have there as well.
Thanks, Tyson. Shanna, less than a minute.
I know. Okay, I want to share with you guys one of my favourite quotes in the whole world by Archbishop Desmond Tutu. It's a foundation of our charity, and it's this. It says, "There comes a time when we need to stop going downstream and pulling people out of the river when they've already drowned. We need to go upstream and find out why they keep falling in. And country people are falling in long before they drown. So I would love to ask for your help to help us go upstream, to help keep making it okay to say no to beers in the bush. And every single one of you can be part of that. And that's what I would love to ask you to take home with you."
Thank you, Shanna. Thank you very much. Julie.
I'd like to see in the next few years a change so that everyone who seeks protection in this country is allowed to work whilst they are here, so that charities can stop focusing on keeping people alive, keeping them from destitution, and instead be doing useful things like connecting them to regional communities, connecting them to labour opportunities, and actually helping people thrive rather than just helping them survive, which is all we can do at the moment. And I want to see an Australia where we're benefiting our rural communities with our new immigrants, as well as the people who've come here seeking protection and security.
Yeah. Thank you, Julie. And Nat.
So call to action. I want each and every one of you today leaving this room to go back and make a safer environment for everybody, whether it's women's safety in your workplace or around you, or whether it's First Nations, or whether it's asylum seekers or job seekers coming in from overseas. I'd like to see more investment as well in encouraging better and inclusive workspaces in Australia.
Thanks very much, Nat. And thank you. Let's acknowledge our panel. What an extraordinary group. Thank you so much for your contribution. And I'd just like to thank you all for being remarkable. And I know that Lucy's going to welcome Matt Moran, but Matt and I sit on the Telling Our Story advisory panel for National Farmers Federation. So we're just about to hear from Matt, so that'll be an exciting opportunity. But thanks again, and let's really make sure that we acknowledge the work that's going on, and I recommend to visit their websites and get involved. So thanks very much.
Thanks so much, Robbie.